Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question before you answer it. Think about the last time you failed at something. A goal you didn't reach, a relationship that fell apart, a version of yourself you were supposed to become by now, but didn't. Now here's the uncomfortable part. What if the reason you failed wasn't bad luck? What if it wasn't the economy or the timing or the people around you? What if the thing standing directly in the way of everything you want is you? Not your situation, not your circumstances. You. Specifically, a version of you that you've been defending for years without even realizing it. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you is going to feel a little uncomfortable at first. But by the end of this, something is going to shift, something real, and you're never going to look at yourself the same way again. Hey, welcome back. If you're new here, genuinely glad you found this. This channel exists for one reason only, to take the books that could change your life and actually make them land. Not in a, here are 5 bullet points kind of way, but in a way that hits you right here, in the chest, where real change actually begins. Today we're going deep into one of the most quietly devastating books ever written. Ego is the Enemy, by Ryan Holiday. And if you've heard of this book before, I promise you, you haven't heard it like this. If this kind of content speaks to you, do me a small favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. It genuinely helps this reach the people who need it most. Now, let's go. Imagine you're watching a movie. The hero is talented, driven, ambitious. Everyone around them can see how much potential they have. They're working hard, making moves, telling people about their big plans. And then, slowly, without anyone noticing, they start to fall apart. Not because of a villain, not because the world turned against them, but because of something growing quietly inside them, something they couldn't see. Ryan Holiday calls it ego. But here's the thing, and this is important. Ego doesn't look the way most people think it does. It doesn't always show up as arrogance. It doesn't always show up as someone with a loud voice in a room full of people, telling everyone how great they are. Sometimes ego looks like anxiety. Sometimes it looks like the constant need to prove yourself. Sometimes it looks like being unable to take feedback without feeling attacked. Sometimes it looks like a person who can't start something new because they're terrified of looking stupid. That's still ego, just a quieter, more dangerous version of it. Holiday opens this book with a line that stopped me cold the first time I read it. He says that the ego we're talking about is not confidence or self-respect. It's the voice inside your head that whispers, "I am more than this." It's the part of you that is more concerned with how you appear than with who you actually are. And here's the terrifying part. Most of us walk through every single day being silently controlled by this voice, making decisions based on it, building our entire identity around protecting it, and we don't even know it's happening. Now, Holiday structures this entire book around one brilliant idea. He says ego shows up at 3 specific moments in your life, and understanding these 3 moments could literally save you from a version of your life you don't want to live. The first moment is when you're just starting out, when you're aspiring towards something. The second is when you've achieved some success, when you're on the rise. And the third is when things fall apart, when you're in the fall. Every single one of us is in one of these 3 places right now. And in each one, ego shows up differently and destroys differently. Let's start at the beginning. Think about the last time you had a really exciting idea. Maybe it was a business you wanted to start, a skill you wanted to learn, a life you were finally going to build for yourself. You felt it, right? That electric energy, that sense of possibility. And then, what did you do with it? If you're honest, you probably told someone about it. Maybe a few people. Maybe you posted about it. Maybe you spent hours imagining the version of yourself on the other side of it. And here's what Holiday says about that moment. He says, talking about your goals gives your brain the same emotional reward as actually achieving them. Read that again. The feeling you get when you describe your future success to someone, that warm, proud, validated feeling. Your brain registers that as real progress, even when nothing has been done. This is one of the most insidious traps ego sets for ambitious people, because the more talented you are, the more convincing your vision sounds, and the more people around you respond to that vision with excitement, the more that internal voice says, "See, I already am this person." But you're not yet. Holiday tells the story of a young man who spent years talking about the novel he was going to write. He had the idea, he had the outline. He would describe the characters in vivid detail at dinner parties. People were fascinated. They told him it sounded brilliant. He never wrote the book, because in his mind, he had already written it. The applause was already there. The identity was already worn. The work never came. And I think somewhere in your life, you know exactly what that feels like. Starting today, try this. Pick one goal you keep talking about, and for the next 30 days, don't tell a single person about it. Just work, in silence. Let the results do the talking eventually. That silence, that discipline, that's where real identity is built. But wait, this is just the beginning, because it gets deeper, a lot deeper. Holiday says that during the aspiring stage, the most dangerous thing you can do is believe you already know enough. He calls this the problem of the genius who stops being a student, and he uses a powerful example to illustrate it. There was a young man who showed up in a city with nothing but ambition and raw talent. He could have gone into any room and declared himself the smartest person there. He had every reason to, but instead, he chose a different posture. He chose to be a student. Every single day, he sat at the feet of people who knew more than him. He asked questions instead of giving answers. He listened more than he spoke. He made himself useful instead of impressive. And because he kept that student mindset, he kept growing. Long after other people his age had stalled. Here's the line that wrecked me from this section of the book. Holiday writes, "The pretense of knowledge is our most dangerous vice because it prevents us from getting any better." Think about that. Right now, you might be thinking, I already know most of this stuff. I've read books like this before. And that thought? That right there? That's ego. That's the exact voice Holiday is warning you about. The moment you think you know enough is the exact moment you stop growing. Now here's the part nobody talks about. We spend so much time being afraid of failure, we never prepare for what success actually does to a person. Because success is not the end of the battle with ego. It's where the real battle begins. Holiday says that when things start working, when you get the promotion, the recognition, the achievement you've been chasing, ego doesn't disappear. It inflates. And an inflated ego is one of the most dangerous forces on earth. Picture this, a young athlete, incredibly talented, works harder than anyone in the room, finally gets called up, finally gets recognition. Reporters start calling, people start paying attention, and slowly, almost invisibly, he starts to change. He starts to believe his own story. He stops listening to coaches. He starts mistaking praise for results. He confuses the feeling of success with the work that created it. And then one day, he wakes up and can't understand why things are falling apart. Because the thing that got him there was never his talent alone. It was his hunger, his humility, his willingness to be corrected. And somewhere in the applause, he lost all three. This happens to CEOs, to artists, to parents, to anyone who experiences any kind of success. Holiday says the key to surviving the rise is something brutally simple. Do the work. Stay a student. Manage yourself. Not your image, not your reputation, not how you appear on social media, yourself. He uses the story of Howard Hughes, one of the richest, most talented men who ever lived, as a warning. Hughes had everything: genius, wealth, ambition, success. But he was so convinced of his own greatness, so protected by his own ego, that he slowly disconnected from reality entirely. He spent the last years of his life completely alone, terrified, paranoid, unable to function. Ego didn't just stop his growth, It consumed him. Canvas strategy, the most underrated idea in the book. Okay, I need to pause here and share one specific idea from this book that I think is so underrated, so quietly powerful that it could change the trajectory of your entire career. Holiday calls it the canvas strategy. Here's the idea. When you're new, when you're starting out, when you're the youngest person in the room, or the least experienced, or the least recognized, your ego wants you to fight for your place. Your ego wants you to make sure people know what you're capable of. But the canvas strategy says the opposite. It says, find ways to make the people above you successful. Clear the path for them. Remove their obstacles. Do the work that nobody else wants to do. Be so useful, so indispensable, so quietly powerful, that your presence becomes irreplaceable. Not for the credit, not for the recognition, but because that's how real mastery is built. Holiday points to Ulysses S. Grant as an example. Early in his military career, Grant was overlooked constantly. Other officers were flashier, more politically connected, more interested in being seen as heroes. Grant just did the work. He took the assignments nobody wanted. He solved the problems quietly. He made the people around him better. And eventually, history remembered his name above all the others. The canvas strategy isn't weakness. It's one of the most sophisticated power moves that exists. Because while everyone else is fighting for credit, you're actually getting good. Hey, if you're still here, I just want to say something genuinely. This stuff matters. Not in a motivational poster kind of way, but in a, this is your actual life and it's passing kind of way. So if this is resonating, drop a comment below and tell me the one idea so far that hit you hardest. And if you want to go deeper on books like this one, subscribe. We do this every week. Now, let's talk about the hardest part. Here's a question I want you to sit with. What do you do when things fall apart? Not when things are slightly inconvenient, not when you have a bad week, but when the thing you built collapses, when the relationship you invested years in ends, when the career you sacrificed everything for disappears overnight. What do you do with that? Because here's the truth that most people aren't ready to hear. Your ego will tell you a story about that failure, and that story will almost always be a lie. Ego in failure sounds like this. They were threatened by me. The timing was wrong. The world didn't understand what I was doing. I deserved better. This wasn't my fault. And sometimes, pieces of those things are true. The world is unfair. Circumstances do matter. Other people do sometimes act against you. But the ego's version of events leaves out the one part you actually have power over. Your own role, your own decisions, your own blind spots. Holiday says that what separates people who bounce back from failure, from people who are destroyed by it, is not talent, not connections, not even resources. It's the willingness to see clearly, to look at what happened without defending yourself, without softening the edges, without making yourself the hero of a story where you were actually the obstacle. That takes a different kind of courage than most people are willing to have. Let me tell you about a woman named Katharine Graham. She inherited control of the Washington Post after the tragic death of her husband. She had no experience running a major media company. She was surrounded by powerful men who didn't take her seriously. And she had spent decades living in the shadow of a husband who, by her own account, made her feel small. She had every excuse to crumble, and her ego could have easily dressed that crumbling up in 1,000 sophisticated justifications. But instead, she chose something harder. She chose to face her own fear directly, to admit what she didn't know, to listen to people she disagreed with, to make painful decisions without the comfort of certainty. And she built the Washington Post into one of the most important media institutions in American history. She published the Pentagon Papers. She stood her ground during Watergate when powerful people were threatening her personally and legally. She didn't do that by believing in her own greatness. She did it by refusing to let her ego make decisions for her. Holiday uses her story as a reminder that the fall, whether it's failure, loss, or crisis, is not the end of the story. It's an invitation. An invitation to strip away everything fake and find out what's actually real underneath. Now here's something Holiday talks about that I want you to really absorb. He calls it the difference between dead time and alive time. Dead time is when something goes wrong and you just wait. You wait for circumstances to change. You feel sorry for yourself. You stay frozen. Alive time is when something goes wrong and you use it. You learn. You read. You build something internal that nobody can take from you. He gives the example of Malcolm X, who spent years in prison, which could have been pure dead time. And for a while it was. But then something shifted inside him. He started reading voraciously. He started educating himself with a ferocity that most people never find in freedom. Prison became the most transformative period of his entire life. Not because the circumstances were good, but because he decided to make them alive. Right now, you might be in a version of dead time, a job that's going nowhere, a season of life that feels stalled, a period of waiting that feels like punishment. The question isn't how do I get out of this faster? The question is, what can I build inside myself right now that I couldn't build any other way? That question is the difference between dead time and alive time, and only you can answer it. There's one more idea I want to share before we get to the ending, and this one is going to land differently depending on where you are in your life. Holiday talks about the danger of what he calls performance over practice. We live in a world that rewards performance, the highlight reel, the polished version, the curated story of your success. And ego loves this world, because ego lives on being seen. But here's what gets quietly destroyed in a life built on performance. The actual work. The messy, private, unglamorous, honest work of becoming something real. Think about the musician who spends more time posting about their music than actually practicing it. Think about the entrepreneur who attends every conference, gives every interview, builds an audience before they've built anything worth talking about. Think about the person who is more invested in appearing wise than in actually getting wiser. This is one of the quietest and most devastating forms ego takes in the modern world. And the antidote is almost embarrassingly simple. Do the work when nobody is watching. Build the thing before you announce it. Practice the skill before you perform it. Let there be a long, private season of real growth before you invite anyone in to see it. Because the work done in private is the only work that builds something that actually lasts. I want to pause here and ask you something real. Honestly, somewhere in everything I've shared today, what's the one version of ego you recognize most in yourself? Is it talking more than doing? Is it not being able to take feedback without feeling attacked? Is it performing instead of practicing? Drop it in the comments. Not for me, for yourself. Because naming it is the first real step to moving past it. Remember the question I asked you at the very beginning. Think about the last time you failed at something, and ask yourself if the real obstacle was you. Here's what Ryan Holiday ultimately wants you to understand. Ego is not something you defeat once. It's not a boss you fight at the end of a level who stays defeated. It comes back, in new forms, in quieter disguises, in the voice that says you're ready when you're not, in the voice that says you're not responsible when you are, in the voice that says your comfort is more important than your growth. The work of a lifetime is learning to hear that voice and choose differently. And here's what makes this book unlike almost anything else you'll read. Holiday doesn't promise you that getting rid of ego will make you successful. He promises you something more valuable. He says it will make you free. Free from the exhausting performance of maintaining an image. Free from the fragility of an identity built on external validation. Free from the prison of needing everyone to understand your value before you can feel it yourself. That kind of freedom is rarer than success, and infinitely more worth having. There's a line near the end of the book that I've thought about more times than I can count. Holiday writes something like this, that the great men and women of history weren't special because they had no ego. They were special because they had something stronger than ego, a purpose, a cause, something bigger than themselves that made the ego feel small in comparison. And when you find that thing, when you attach yourself to something that truly matters, something beyond your own recognition, your own glory, your own story, the ego loses its grip. Not because you fought it and won, but because you found something worth more than what it was offering. So let me ask you one final question, and I mean this in the most sincere way possible. What is the thing in your life that is bigger than your need to look good? Because that thing is where your real life begins. Not the life you perform for other people, not the identity you protect and defend and curate, your real life. The one that exists on the other side of ego, and it's been waiting for you, patiently, for a long time. If this script moved something in you today, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the right words, at the right time, can genuinely change the direction of a person's life. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself, do the work, stay humble, and remember, the enemy was never out there. It was always in here.